Alrighty, what we might do is, it is gone 12:02. I think we will look to kick off. Welcome everybody, welcome to, on behalf of the professional partners here, we are, sorry, my role is to continually admit people as well, so I'm going to be just admitting people while I'm also introducing how our session is going to work, and more importantly, our guests. I think we've got a fantastic topic that we're going to be talking about. As you guys are continuing to come on, if you could please just mute yourself, we'll try and do that as well, if I can see that, but hopefully our guests don't. Hang on, I'm just admitting a couple more people. And yeah, look, we're talking about a really, really interesting topic. And I think, you know, when we talk about cyber, we're talking about cyber security, we're talking about cyber attacks. It's an interesting one, I suppose, because only last week, I think it was, Channel 9 had a cyber attack. So I think it's quite topical to start talking about from an accounting firm point of view. I think that, you know, the data that each of you as our accountants would be holding, the client data, the information you have. And that's why we thought about this, I think it's good to get
There's a dolphin swimming in front.
There we go. We've just got to, someone on the golf course. Good effort to jump in from the golf course, but I might just mute you there, Stan.
How are you talking?
All good, mate. Work on your swing. So we thought it was really, really important to try and, again, it's an interesting topic, and some of the stuff we're going to go through has been really important. We've got two fantastic guests. I've got Mark Goudie joining me on this side. I've got Jamie Beresford joining me on that side. Guys, welcome, first of all.
Thanks, Paul. Good to be here.
Thanks, Paul.
My pleasure. Now, Jamie, I've got you coming in from Bali, which is obviously always good. I can see your fan in the background there. It's starting to get a bit warmer over there, is it?
Yeah. And it keeps the mozzie off my legs. Yeah, no, it's good. It's coming good now. We're sort of through that rainy season, and it's starting to warm up nicely.
Yeah, fantastic. Let me just quickly check. Any more participants I need to admit? I need to make sure I'm doing my role properly. So look, again, to all of you that are joining us for the first time, and I know there's a number of you that are joining us for the first time, welcome on behalf of the Professional Partners Network. And for those of you that are coming back, that have been through our virtual lunch series for 2020 and into 2021, we give you a warm welcome back. For those of you that are going to join me for a drink, I know, James, it's a bit early in the morning for over in the West, but I know he's got his bintang there. It's important we have a sip. Ooh, the people in the office always look at me and go, you have a problem, don't you? Yeah, we won't talk about that right now. And I'll just follow it up with my water. So yeah, look, for those of you that don't know much about us, let me just quickly share a little bit about the Professional Partners Network. Look, we were lucky enough to do a lot of research with a lot of firms. Sorry, as I enter more firms here, around how the service offering can sit alongside, let's call it your financial planning division, and what we offer firms in terms of a new service offering for their clients that sit in the alternate asset space. And it's worked so well with a number of accounting firms, with their financial planners. We work with a lot of those guys as well. There's a few of the planners on the line today. And it's more about just providing your clients with other opportunities, or sharing opportunities, more importantly. While our cash rate is so low, we are able to do some really cool things with the assets that we hold on our balance sheet here, and offer them out to clients for fixed terms and fixed returns. So if it's something you want to talk to us about, we're not here to talk to you about that today. We're here to talk about cybersecurity. But if you want to talk to us about that later on, you're more than welcome to. Now, let's get into today's topic. And I want to talk about, again, the topic of cybersecurity, cyber attacks in particular. Look, I might start with the guys and ask you guys to both jump in at any stage here. Let's start with, I suppose, the title, cyber security. I mentioned Channel 9 before, that's just gone through a cyber attack. I've got an insider there that they haven't been allowed back into their Docklands office now. This is the second week they've been allowed back into their office. There is talk that it might have come from overseas. What actually is a cyber attack? Who would like to commence with that?
Well, that's probably straight up my alley, Paul, considering I've been managing incidents for clients for at least 15 years now. Cyber attack is where an unauthorized party gets into the victim's network. And that could be, it could be any particular type of group. So there's generally, I would say, two types of groups that would be involved with looking at a services company, like an accounting firm. That would either be a nation state that's interested in exactly what you were talking about, getting a hold of the firm's clients' data. You think about yourselves as professional organizations, you hold a lot of your clients' very sensitive data all in the one place. So if I, as an attacker, one of these adversaries I've got behind me, if I'm in that, if that's what I'm doing for a job, I'm looking at these really interesting data aggregators, such as yourselves, that hold a lot of incredibly sensitive client data, and that might help me, as a nation state adversary. And in this part of the world, we're talking China. Secondly, there's also ransomware, where this has been a huge issue in the last 5 years, but the last 12 months has just been absolutely crazy. We've seen a 300% increase in the amount of ransomware in the last, since COVID began. There's been a 300% increase in the amount of ransomware. So ransomware's changed a bit in the last 12 months. So it used to be that the ransomware operators would simply encrypt your data and then say, "Give me some money, and I'll give you your data back."
Your data back, yeah.
Yeah. So they're still doing that, but now to try and encourage the victim to pay earlier, or pay more, or even pay at all, they're saying, we're going to release, we've stolen some data from you, some of your sensitive data, and we're going to publicly release it to name and shame you. Even though you're a victim, you're still getting blamed and named and shamed by these criminals. So it's becoming a significantly more dangerous problem for the victim organisations.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I know, even listening to, I suppose, if you weren't in Melbourne, maybe the Channel 9 thing didn't hit, but I know here in Melbourne they were talking about, and there wasn't any ransom. And it was interesting. They said, well, we're waiting to hear if there's a ransom so that they can give the data back. And I thought, couldn't be better timing, because this is about education for us. This is about for everyone online and for me to say, well, how do we get more educated in this space, and how do we start to protect? And I think we're going to work down a few of the different mitigation strategies and thought process, and we're going to work around cyber hygiene as an example. So yeah, but it's interesting when you talk about ransomware, and is that typical that would happen?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And look, during an incident, the one thing, there's one thing that's going to reign is chaos. We're always trying to tell organisations to get ready for an incident. It's a bit like, if you live in the bush, you need to have a fire evacuation strategy and plan. Yeah. Or if you've got some natural disaster, like my wife is from Japan, so everyone there has got an earthquake evacuation strategy. So you need to have these strategies in place before an incident happens, and because all these incidents are absolute chaos. So when it strikes, it's good to have a plan beforehand, and that way organisations are able to properly deal with it, understand what's going on, and come out of it with less reputational less reputational damage and business impact.
And look, I suppose this is the great thing, and I'll, sort of, Jamie, if you've got a thought on that as well, really happy to hear your thoughts, and we're going to sort of wax in between both you guys on certain topics. And I suppose not only is there, for our firms online, there's our firms that obviously hold that valuable data, and nowadays, well, I'd say 100% of it's all cloud-based. So therefore, but there's also an element there of the educational side to the firm's clients as well. So how are they protecting their clients' data in this sort of scenario as well? Jamie, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, it's interesting trend you're seeing there, Mark, as well, where this threat to spray the data out there now is so much more prevalent. And I think what changed there is the legislation actually had the reverse effect of what it was meant to do, because once the data is sprayed, that is a breach, and that is where the insurer gets involved, and that is essentially what the cyber criminals want now, okay? Because once there's an insurer involved, that's how they get paid, because there's now money there to pay the ransom, and that, you know, sometimes we talk about this where it's actually the legislation has driven this phenomenon now, because they're very good at figuring out how to get paid. At the end of the day, they don't want to spray your data. There's no the gain in that. The gain for them is the threat of it. So you then have insurance money to pay a larger ransom.
Interesting. The one thing that always springs to mind is PI. So it's similar, I suppose.
Yeah.
So when this happens, let's say that there is an attack, what actually happens? How would we know that it's actually taken place?
Yeah, good question.
I'll jump in.
Been looking into this for a long time, and often the victims don't know until the adversary announces themselves.
Right.
I've worked on some breaches that have gone on for almost a decade. Yeah, a decade. The adversary was a nation state, and they didn't want to be found out, so they didn't do anything to announce themselves. Whereas a ransomware, you can't log into your computer. It's got a screen in front of your face, blocking out everything else and telling you to pay some money, because the adversary wants to get paid. So it can be a really difficult thing to identify that. So we have a tool which we use to identify attacks as they start. So that's one of the reasons why we want to get in front of these problems, is to minimize the damage that gets done, because unfortunately my life is not like you see on TV. I don't push a few buttons and in a 45-minute TV episode we're able to solve all cyber crimes. These things happen over days, weeks, and months often. So victims will be getting their data exfiltrated for a very long time in the case of ransomware. And often if it's a nation state threat actor, victims only find out when organizations like CrowdStrike get involved to look inside their organization to see if there's anything going on. One of the things that we always look out for is, when you see a cybersecurity incident in a particular industry vertical. I'm talking to accounting firms today. So let's just say it happens in Acme Accounting. Every other accounting firm starts to look at themselves and say, hey, is this happening to me as well? Are we also a potential victim? And everyone starts looking around in their own network. And that's where we see a lot of incidents coming from, is when there's a victim in one particular industry vertical. Everybody in that vertical starts to look at their own closet and get really interested about whether they're also potentially a victim to a cyber attack.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And then I'm going to go to the group soon. I know we've got a number of things online, so if anyone wants to share, I'm going to ask you guys to unmute and share very soon. But I suppose, Jamie, it's an interesting one where, I don't know, if you look at it in a sort of a practical sense, someone breaks into your house, I don't know, you might put additional locks on your door, you might put a security door on your front door, you might change the locks on your windows depending on how they got in. What's the equivalent in cyber, I suppose? So what's your thoughts on that?
It's a really good analogy, because often when something like that comes up, the conversation goes to, oh my God, what did they steal? What happened? That's and it's same as the car accident. What was the damage? Who died? Etc. Generally not how it happened, because as Mark's saying, it's really about understanding how to prevent it from happening in the first place. And what we're seeing is the devil. To make that really simple, the devil's in the email. Okay, once somebody email, generally in Office 365 in these public cloud applications, doesn't have a huge focus on security. Their focus is on convenience. If Microsoft go putting a ton of security around. If they enforce, say, for instance, two-factor around their front door by default, they would A, lose a lot of market share because it would seem clunky, and B, have a huge support overhead to manage people logging in. So they address security in a way that basically pushes onto you as the business owner to be responsible. So what that means is it's very easy to either brute force those mailboxes, your email, and or trick somebody into entering a password to their email somewhere and then get in. And email is like your master account, right? If I get into your mailbox, I can go and reset all your passwords to everything else. I'm going to have access to a ton of data that you've emailed your clients and they've emailed you. But more specifically, and this is when Mark's talking about trends, this is a real trend where I can actually learn so much about you by going through your sent items. I can find out, and in an accounting firm specifically, I could find out who approves your bills or vice versa, whose bills you approve. And these are the types of things they're looking for now, because it's gone from getting into a mailbox. Before COVID, 99 times out of 100, when someone got into a mailbox, they just basically email all your contacts and make you look silly. Maybe one of your clients would click and they'd get infected and you've cop a bit of blowback. But now what we're seeing is they just seem to be, since COVID, far better resource where they're actually going through and researching you and having conversations on your behalf. So saying, start setting up a conversation with the person who pays the bills. So your bookkeeper, for example, and saying, hey, how long does it take to pay money into a PayPal account? Oh, usually 24 hours, I think. Oh, no worries. I need something urgently. Can you push this through? I need to send 20K to this account, and manipulating you based on understanding a lot about how you talk and who you talk to, and then assuming your identity. And that's kind of, I just think these organizations are growing. They're a big business and they're getting more sophisticated now. So look, to answer that question, it really is, there's a couple of things to make it simple is your mailbox. The devil really is in the email, and the payload is what happens when, what they steal. There's all sorts of different things. There's ransomware, there's this kind of targeted fraud, there's all different things, but understanding how they get in. And there's a couple of other things. I'm sure Mark will have some value to add there as well on the preventative measures that he's talking about. But really, your mailbox, if there's one point I can make, it's the devil really is in the email. It's not them stealing access to Xero directly or anything where you would perceive your client's information to be.
And is it fair to assume that, and I think you mentioned it before, and everyone online, and certainly me as well, uses Xero, and whether we're using Practice Ignition or whether we're using whatever, you mentioned two-factor authentication. Is that the reason why this came in?
Yes. And you'll see, high security, your bank has two-factor authentication because on them, someone gets in, right? So they make you get your phone out every time you log in. It's coming. And, what happens then is you'll see app by app. The ATO is actually mandating any app that lodges, any app that handles super, and any app that has payroll information, they're mandating two-factor around those apps. So you're seeing in an accounting stack, every year there's another app being mandated for two-factor, and that's creating a headache for everyone, right? Where you've got this two-factor sprawl. It's a pain in the ass sometimes because they all have different apps and codes and different things. So there's what's emerging now, and we're just on the cusp of this. It's at the early stages. It's a single sign-on technology that pulls it all together. So when you start work, you log in once on your computer. You will enter your two-factor token, and then from there you click through to all of your applications instead of having a different token and a different method on each one. This single gateway, a single sign-on tool, or SO.
Okay, interesting. Mark, before I open up to a couple, because I don't think the firm is online that I'm aware of what happened, but I'll give everyone an example, but I'm going to throw to the firms anyway. But mate, are there different types of attacks, different types of cyber attacks?
Yeah, sure. Look, the main two, the ones we've already spoken about. So where there's a ransomware incident, so that's predominantly what we call e-crime or electronic crime. It's really just a simple matter of saying, I've got your stuff, give me some money, I'll give it back to you. That's really pretty simply what it is. There's a few other different types of e-crime. The other one that we see a lot of, and actually I think most people would actually be surprised with the prevalence of it, is the nation-state threat actors that are compromising our organisation. So they're looking to steal intellectual property, gain a financial advantage, even though it's a nation-state. We see also some very interesting organisations, particularly North Korea. They act like a nation state, but they also act like e-crime because they're trying to get currency into their country. Because they're a pariah state, they don't have the ability to trade with most Western countries. They've really only got one or two trading partners, and they effectively they steal currency for a lot of their national projects. In addition to that, there's hacktivists that hack for a cause or to raise awareness about a particular issue. I don't think that's something that the group would be particularly exposed to. I would be very much focused around thinking that what you'll most likely experience will be if you're going to experience a cyber incident, I would be focusing on getting prepared to deal with a ransomware incident, but also at the back of your mind have a thought about the data that you're holding, the data you're processing, storing, and transmitting on behalf of your clients. That's sensitive data, because we have seen, very recently, we did see with the Microsoft Exchange vulnerability that was announced maybe a month and a half ago, I think it was. Okay. There was a number of Chinese groups that were actively compromising the Exchange servers, where all the email, like Jamie was saying, where all the emails held. They were compromising the Exchange servers to gain access to the mailboxes of victim organisations. Once that vulnerability got announced, then every e-crime actor also jumped in and started compromising all of the other vulnerable Exchange servers as well. So there's a lot of different ways in which these attacks can be carried out, but I'd really be focusing on the main two of getting ready for getting ready for a ransomware incident, and potentially considering a nation state as well, because they're very interested in the types of data that organisations that store and aggregate a lot of really sensitive information would be holding.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I just had a quick look, and I'm happy to open up if anyone wants to share if they've had a cyber breach, let's call it. Has anyone actually experienced that within their firm that they'd like to share? Happy for you to unmute. I'll share a story of one that happened with a firm here in Melbourne, in Glen Waverley, very soon. I just had a quick look to see if they're online, but they're not online. I was hoping that they would share it personally, but that wasn't call it an e-crime, that was an email. So exactly what Jamie was talking about before. They got into their emails and they requested that the firm transfer their refund. I've just set up a new bank account, transfer the refund to the new bank account. And it looked legitimate. I can remember them showing me, and it was totally legitimate. All they decided to do was pick up the phone and say, let us just double check whether or not they've actually sent the email. And you can see the trail, everything. So they'd actually got into the sent items, and it was just phenomenal that it was actually a breach. It was not from the original person. So again, little things like that I think we've just got to stay on top of. Anyone got a story they want to share? Take silence. That's all right.
Generally not barbecue talk, because especially if it starts with someone doing that perceived benefit of hindsight usually seems silly, and that's half the problem, right? Because there's no peer learning. You don't turn up to the next accounting event and go, guess what? I accidentally clicked on something and it cost us 30 grand. So and the problem with that is there's just not as much peer learning as in other things that happen and trends, and everyone catches on really quickly. This is taking longer.
Yeah. And is there threats in terms of, I know sometimes, and some of these organisations or individuals, they're obviously pretty clever in sort of what they do. I know I sometimes get dodgy little text messages to click here and there's a parcel. I got one only 3 days ago saying, "Oh, there's a parcel being delivered. Can you please make sure you click here and confirm everything?" And I just don't touch it. But I'm thinking, what's the parcel that's been delivered, you know?
Yeah.
So they draw you into that sort of aspect to go, what am I missing out on? The old FOMO.
It's called a lure for a reason, Paul.
Correct. So
We've got someone out in a boat somewhere. He's probably fishing. So he knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Again, important that we stay away from that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and that, you know, what you're talking about is your classic business email compromise scam, where the adversary tricks you into releasing some funds. There's been a whole host of there's even organisations that carry this out. What we call the Nigerian confraternities. They're actually groups of people that sit in, effectively a boiler room in Nigeria and carry out these long-winded attacks. And they've got quite good at it, as you say. You're talking about a firm in Glen Waverley. There'd be 100 stories like that. We also saw this was happening with the transfer of real estate. Obviously, there's a little bit of money going around, when real estate is being transferred, and if you can convince someone that's carrying out the transaction to change the account numbers where it's going, that can be money that can be very hard to get back. There has been some quite public issues. A lot of what we're seeing in recent times is, I think one of the subjects that you were talking about, Jamie, was hygiene. A lot of what we've been seeing in the last 6 months is hygiene is becoming a big issue again because of a lack of patching. Patching of externally facing systems, like the Exchange issue, patching. I actually wrote a list of them down. This is just from the last 6 months. Exchange, which everyone in cybersecurity was talking about, was a patching issue. FortiGate VPN, the Accellion, file transfer, Mobile Iron, MDM, and SolarWinds as well. These were all issues that could have been prevented by patching.
Wow.
A lot of the incidents that we're talking about today can be prevented with patches as well. So these are the basic things that if you've got a system that's facing the internet, make sure that gets patched straight away. That's where an attacker is often looking now. And what they're doing is you can scan the whole internet and look for a particular vulnerability. So I could get 1,000, 10,000 hits for a particular vulnerability. I don't care where in the world it is. What I might do is if I'm carrying out that activity, I might then on-sell that to another organization, which will go in and play the game of working out what to steal and how they can monetize the particular vulnerability that's been that someone has identified. And they're building a production line now where you've got someone will do the initial access, someone else will then build persistence, another organization will work out how to get the data out, then someone else will work out how to monetize it. Yeah. So the adversaries are getting very professional. And to Jamie's point, I think they network better than we do. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, they're much better at working out how to productize everything and how to some of the tools that adversaries make. They've even got 24/7 help desk support, which can be better than you can get from some software vendors around the world. It's pretty impressive operation that some of them run, despite the fact I hate them. I do admire them in some other ways.
So this is good though, because to be fair, and I'm putting my hand up because I think I know a little bit about IT, but I don't think I do. That's why we have IT experts out here. If I looked around the corner, Mahesh would definitely be there. But a lot of us on the line may not. I know Dan Beck's on here from Power Tynan, and I know that obviously he's in that space. But you spoke about let's talk about cyber hygiene for a second, certainly for our accounting industry. So when you talk about patches, is that something we should be talking to our IT divisions about and making sure? So is that hygiene?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the number one hygiene, and Jamie's already brought up number two, which is the multi-factor authentication. If you don't have multi-factor authentication on your email, and it's Office 365 or some other cloud-based email, even if it's Outlook Web Access that's being hosted, on premise at your organisation. It's not a matter of if, it's when it will be compromised if you're just using username and password.
Yeah. Well, there's probably Outlook or Google, isn't there? And is there any danger into the same thing if you're using obviously your mobile? You're more likely to?
Well, that's interesting, and that's what lulls people into a false sense of security, because your emails are either on your phone or on your computer, right? So you perceive it to be in your physical possession, but all of your emails are actually just behind a username and password in a web browser. If you go to office365.com, you can type your email address and your password, and it's all sitting up there. And it's a really good point you make there, Paul, because it is something that people need to, because you do, and we all do it. You've got your phone in your pocket, you've got your laptop, you've got a password on your laptop. Your emails feel safe, but they're still behind one single set of credentials on the web that anyone can access.
Unbelievable. And I think that's I suppose while this is only going for 45 minutes, we've got to try and gather as much information as we can. Because I'm just writing stuff down at the same time as I'm doing all this. These are things we need to be aware of, more importantly.
Yeah, on that hygiene piece, I think, at a certain point, if we're not all experts in IT, and really it's just about having the right IT services provider at a certain point. Same as when I go to an accountant, there's a certain point that I just have to trust that person's professional expertise. Well, what we can do is mitigate the risk, because it is often a human issue as well as an IT issue. It is someone's clicked something, or someone has not been as diligent as you are, Paul, when you're getting that delivery text message or whatever, and they have entered the username and password in. So certain things you need to have in place to make sure that you've covered off and you are going to be covered in that event. Okay, so first of all, having a remote work policy in place, or an employee usage policy that covers these things and sets expectations with the team. So if you're actually saying, here's what you should do if you do receive a prompt like that, and that's part of an employee agreement, especially with remote work where people are accessing your client information on machines outside of your IT control. The other one is providing some training to go with that to your team members, and that way, if the worst does happen, you're going to have some fallback and be able to demonstrate that you have taken some preventative steps to educate your team, and you're going to be covered by either your PI or your cyber insurance.
How and I know
just tidies it up from a risk perspective.
Yeah, look, you spoke about working remotely. Obviously, you're in Bali and you've got teams all around the world. So when we're over during COVID as well, we're obviously all of us are working from home. We're not allowed to come into the office. We're all working on our Wi-Fi network. Is there something there we need to be aware of to mitigate any sort of risk there on our Wi-Fi network?
Yeah, because you're blending your environment in with personal computing and family computing. Is it the same computer that your teenagers are downloading movies on that's full of ransomware already, or full of spyware and things like that? And that's where that challenge comes into. Sure, Wi-Fi networks as well. You might have a next door neighbor who's tapped into it, or someone else in the family who's running tools and collecting data. It's a real issue, and it all happened so quick, right? In March, we all just put the computer under the arm, or if we took extra monitor, or went home, we were up and running the next day. Well, oh sweet, we're all still productive, but the security aspect came later, and this is a challenge, especially where you're now reading work flexibility is going to be here to stay in some way, shape, or form, and that's going to be a fascinating journey to see how that evolves over the next couple of years. But how are regulators going to, and how are businesses going to make sure that they are setting the right expectations, or putting the right steps in place to make sure that they're protecting their clients, data that's being accessed in any way, shape, or form. You know, you got people in shared houses where you've got, you know, people all over the place coming in and out of a room, sharing a network, sharing a computer. It's all things that are going to have to be worked through over the next couple of years as COVID blows over.
Yeah, really, really interesting. So let's just touch on a few of the. I've got some questions coming through here, which I'm going to ask. So thank you to everyone. If you want to put some stuff in the what do you call that? The chat bar, please do so. So I'm going to come to there's some questions there for Mark as well. So with regards to risk mitigation, so can we just touch on that again in terms of sort of Jamie, some of the stuff that you said, and then I'll hand over to Mark as well if he wants to add to that. So you spoke about a remote work policy. You spoke about training. Was there anything else?
Yep. On validating your insurance, either making sure your PI covers cyber or looking at one of the insurers. So for cyber, accountancy insurance is one of them that do. They've got a big sort of audit insurance product. They've also got a cyber product that's quite good.
Okay.
On that remote work policy, I think we've got a. I'm just looking. There you go. You can download one. I'll chuck a link in the chat. There's a remote work policy there that covers that piece, and a lovely video of me on the page apparently. Yeah, so that's having that document in place is just your way of demonstrating that you have taken some measures, you have paid some attention to this. So training, and I don't want this turn into a plug. Our product does include free training, free team training that team members can log into, and a lot of firms will just incorporate that into their employee onboarding and then have a refresher once a year. It's gets you CPD points, but it also just ticks that box around mitigating risk. So because you just got to make sure that insurance is going to be there to protect you in the event that something happens like what Mark's talking about.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think that the point you made there is, all of us with that PI cover, check your policy to make sure it covers cyber, and if it doesn't, look to add it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So great point. Mark, have you got anything you'd like to add to that, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd just like to ride on the back again with what Jamie's saying about the about the cyber cover. Not only will it will there potentially be some funds to help you recover from the incident, but the majority of the times the good firms will help you manage the incident as well. So they will manage it to reduce the damage to your organisation. They're doing it, to minimise their loss as well from the claim. But it also does help to manage the risk to your organisation, therefore any reputational damage. The other couple of points I'd raise is a lot of the times when we're investigating an incident, we'll identify data that the client doesn't even know they had anymore. If that gets stolen, it's still reportable. It's still reportable to whatever professional bodies, to the privacy commissioner. So manage your data, especially if it's client data. If you don't need it, delete it. It's just risk that you've got today. And if you can delete it, you're actually reducing the amount of risk. If in the unfortunate event of an incident, you're going to actually reduce the amount of damage that happens to your organisation. We have an EDR tool, Endpoint Detect and Respond, which we can see threats, security incidents happening in real time. We're able to prevent the majority of attacks and then help you detect and respond to others as well. So if there's something that you're interested in, check out crowdstrike.com. We can help you see an incident as it happens, prevent the majority of them, because they'll defeat the common antivirus platforms that are around. And the great thing, with what we do is we're able to minimize the damage that with the business. Also said before about have a plan. We've all got plans for when bad things happen. We've spoken about the issues with bushfires. You have a bushfire evacuation strategy. If you can have a cyber incident as well, this is a policy that you should put in place as well with your organisation to look to minimise what impacts you have. If you do have an incident, you'll be very happy you've had a plan because it will help you. It won't be perfect. Don't let good be the enemy of perfect. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good, I should say. And thanks.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good.
And if anyone wants a look at one of those policies and wants to use, we've got pro formas of all of them. Feel free. I've got the remote work one there. That's one of a stack that we offer, and I'm happy for anyone who's on this today to either email Paul or myself, Paul, and I'm happy to share that data breach response plan. And there's a whole lot of other stuff. There's also a third-party access agreement, which is important because in the event of a breach, if you have a third party, whether it be a contractor, an outsourced team member, an IT provider that triggers a breach, you're on the hook because it's your client's information. So you're putting a third party access agreement covers off that risk, and that just goes another step forward to making sure you have your due diligence in place in the event something happens. And I'm happy to share any of that stuff with you guys. If you want to email myself, I'll just put my
whack it in there. Whack it in there. It's good.
Yeah.
There's quite a few questions. So guys, what I'm going to do is we're getting on to 12:43. We've got a few more things I want to work through, and then there's a few questions I want to answer as well. So we're going to go over. So hopefully you can stick with us because this is really, really good and really, really important. More importantly, so Jamie, you work with a number of accounting firms all around the globe. So mate, have things changed or evolved since COVID? I know to be fair, in Melbourne, for those of us who are in Melbourne, we were shut down for a very long time. For those in Queensland, I don't think they even saw it, except 3 days, maybe a week ago. So, sorry, Danny. But it was, has the cyber attack sort of, call it the tactics, changed or evolved?
Yeah, and they're getting much more targeted. Like I say, it's going from the automated breach a mailbox, spray every contact in the address book with the same infection and try and spread the worm infinitely like that, to going through people's sent items and targeted sophisticated attacks. And I think that's twofold. And it seems like they're just more resourced. They're getting more organized. Like any growing business, they've just got more time and resource to put towards this sort of stuff. But I think they're also preying on the separation, like especially through that remote work piece where you're not in this office next door anymore, right? To go, hey, did you just send me that?
Yeah.
You're not talking to your colleagues and when you do, you're on Zoom and you've got serious stuff to talk about, and you might not. Oh, I noticed you asked me to approve that payment. Was that legit? That's kind of preying on the separation a little bit, and you're seeing that more and more as a common trend.
So, do you think, based on that, what sort of you used the word trend just then? Is the awareness getting greater? These sorts of things.
Yeah. It feels like. We're cloud. It's no longer an education piece. People want more specifics and understand how to protect themselves in plain speak. Cybersecurity is such an ambiguous term. You're seeing it on the news. You're hearing, it's mixed in with military and China and really high level stuff. Enterprise plays where it's different at the SMB level. It's more in small business. The breaches are different. The preventative measures are different. And it's just boiling it down into plain speak because it's a bit like, the prescription is easy. Prescription is easy once a diagnosis is made. Once you understand how it happens, putting the measures in place is cheap, quick, and generally it's not even a technical conversation. It's more of a human issue, just mitigating that risk, making it easy for people to access the applications they need to get their work done. And that's another good point, because we actually say sometimes internally, people pay lip service to cybersecurity. Their time and their convenience wins every single time.
Yeah.
Okay, you cannot argue with easy. So you can put all the measures in place you like, but if you start pissing people off by making it difficult for them to get their work done, it's really good cyber's about protecting data in a really efficient way so people can still meet their deadlines and get what they need done right now.
It's an interesting one because, again, we started this talking about Channel 9, and I've got a bit of an inside word that, and we're talking at a larger scale, so it's not always enterprise. So we're trying to dumb this down a bit, which is fantastic, and that's what today's about. But, there was talk that it was to do with the Russians and to do with a story that 60 Minutes ran. So you're talking about a bigger scale here of things, but they've been shut down effectively for 2 weeks. What does that do for your business?
It's huge. It is huge. Huge outage, and like I say, it makes it confusing as well sometimes when you hear about it, sort of on the news, because it's different at SME.
Let me go to some questions, gents. So this has been fantastic. So thank you very much. There's one here. John's asked, Jamie mentioned cyber insurance a few times. Can you clarify, does insurance actually pay for ransomware? It doesn't. It does. Is it standard? Is it to do with the standard approach for never to pay ransom? So what does it sort of cover, I suppose?
Yeah, it will. The devil's in the detail in any insurance contract. We recommend there's one accountancy insurance for accountants and financial planners. The other one, they're in IPA. They're called IPA Insure, but they do anyone, not just IPA accountants. They have another name, but we know them as IPA Insure. So if you Google that name, they have actually, I reckon, they've kind of taken the lead in my view in terms of what they cover. It's a really good starting point there.
Okay, that's good, because I dare say sort of most firms would be working with the guys at Accountancy Insurance, so the audit insurance, the cyber stuff, but that's good. So IPA Insure as well. So check that out, guys. Got one here. Can Mark comment on the security of FTP processes used for client cloud database folders?
FTP processes, yeah. Ooh, ow. So there's two different types of FTP. Make sure there's one called SFTP, and S is for secure. The other one is a free text protocol. What that means is anybody can see the username and password as it goes past on the network. So if you've got someone on your Wi-Fi, someone that's got access to systems in between A and B, they can gain access to the credentials, so the username and password. Getting back to what we were talking about before with multi-factor being something good. Also using secure protocols like SFTP rather than FTP. There was a public incident last year that where it's a large data processor was compromised, and what we believe happened was part of their processing pipeline was compromised because of some insecure credentials. So it is very common for these types of things to be compromised. So if you've got good IT people or security professionals that can help you to identify whether there's any weaknesses and vulnerabilities, then they will certainly help you improve that type of data security.
Brilliant, thank you. And that was for Ian. So Ian, hopefully that helped. We've got one from Stan here as well. And look, we'll wrap up in about 5 minutes, to be fair to everyone that's still on the line. Thank you very much. Stan, how much value is there in training like KnowBe4? Does anyone know about that?
Yeah, it's a bit like the human firewall. If somebody can know that there's an incident, it's better, like I was saying very early on, best not to be waiting 6 or 7 months to identify an incident. If somebody can see something, say something, that's fantastic.
KnowBe4 is like a tool that will try and trick people into clicking on something and then sort of score them against all their colleagues. So you kind of have a dashboard and you see, okay, out of our 15 staff, these people were tricked. Gamifies it. It is a really good way to get the conversation going within a firm, because people get embarrassed, and it actually brings it home and helps people. It gamifies it. So yeah, we're a big fan. It's something that a lot of IT service providers are rolling out now.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I can't see any other questions. Anyone there that wants to ask anything, you're happy to unmute as well or use the chat bar. Otherwise, given the fact that it's 12:52, look, I think this topic can continue and continue and continue, because I think there's so many things that I've written down here that probably I've got more thoughts around to actually come back and even talk to our guys here at Professional Partners and say, do we have this in place as well? So to all of you that have joined us, please feel free to reach out to Mark, either LinkedIn, or Mark, you might want to throw your email in there as well, mate, into the chat bar. And I'm assuming you'd be okay to be hit up with questions or thoughts or ideas. Check out CrowdStrike. That's where Mark's from. So we certainly, Mark, thank you very much for joining us. I think again, the information that's come through over the last 45, 50 minutes has been awesome. Thank you, mark.goudie@crowdstrike.com. And Jamie Beresford, mate, you got your Bintang. It's probably a little bit early still to drink, unless you got a problem like me.
It's not open. Yeah, it is cold. It is cold, but I put it back in the fridge.
You felt judged, Paul.
Thanks for joining us from Indonesia. So it's always, great to have, again, external parties that are experts in this. So I think a lot of accounting firms are using companies like a Practice Protect, and I know Jamie and I did a podcast a few weeks ago. Probably the clarity wasn't as great as what we'd like. We might have to do that again.
We enjoyed it. That was the main thing.
Yeah, we did have fun. So, mate, again, thank you for, being available. Again, you're in a different time zone. So to Mark and Jamie, thank you very much for joining us. The information that I thought was outstanding. To every one of our guests, thank you very much. Oh, we've got a late, hang on. Oh, we've got a late question here, but it's a long one. So let me have a think about this. Got to read it now to make sure it's... Thanks for sending a long one through, Rod. But we might as well let everyone go because it's probably a big one to move forward. But I think it's a sort of thing that, again, start talking to people about, start talking to IT divisions about, whether it's external or whether it's internal, and making sure that, the key things that all the guys spoke about in terms of that risk mitigation, you've got a list, you've got a plan, you've got your patches, your remote working policies, your training, your PI. I think that's a really, really important one. If you're going to get attacked, you want to make sure you're covered from an insurance point of view, which are easy little ticks of the boxes that you can work through. So, Jamie Beresford, Mark Goudie, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Happy Friday.
Have a great Friday and weekend.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
See ya.
Ciao.